Is it just me or does this feel like deja vu? I'm back with another Ghost Recon PvP video. Surprisingly, this might be something I stick with for a while, or at least until I get tired of PvP. Anyway, as we get closer to the engineer class being released, I wanted to make a video about possibly the worst PvP class depending on your playstyle, the Panther Class. Please like and subscribe for me, that really helps me out and supports the channel. If you have any suggestions on what game I should be playing next, let me know in the comments. Anyway, now that that plug is out of the way, let's go ahead and begin. Is the Panther class absolutely terrible? No, it isn't, but it currently sits as the worst class of the four. What does the class do right, you ask? Not much, but it has some redeeming qualities and possibly the hardest learning curve of the four. Now, the suppression perk is pretty cool, but I don't know how practical it is in PvP, and for what it's worth, it doesn't make the class any worse. Being noticed less on the map is definitely a plus and something that should not be forgotten. With the nature of how combat flows in PvP, which is usually whoever shoots first wins the gunfight, the only way this suppression benefit works for you is if you miss shots. But this sort of touches on another subject of Panther, which I'll leave for later in the video. The Panther is good at movement, aka fast. And when I mean fast, this class is beyond fast. Running with this class is just not realistic in the game. It's like having a Ferrari and the Flash make a baby, then throwing them into a war zone with some camos and an SMG. So if fast is your playstyle, and you want to surprise the enemy team by not flanking them while they're in combat, but instead catching them while they're still trying to pick up their second items, you can cover an extreme distances in a short amount of time, and they can be useful for heals and sabotage missions getting to the other side of the objective if your first is heavily guarded. You can also disappear faster than other classes with footsteps not being as loud as the others, so it leads to this hide and seek gameplay style. But if you are really good at outthinking your opponent instead of brute force and aiming, then this might be the class for you.
Enemies down. Good kill.
There's nothing wrong with Panther and PvE, and it's important to get that out of the way and before people start clamoring for my head to leave single player experience alone. I would say it's probably the second best class in single player. That's how much a difference a philosophy makes in PvE compared to Ghost War. Being able to go unnoticed with an easy flashbang along with a get out of jail free card. You can take out multiple enemies in close range, disappear, reappear so fast it makes you really feel like John Wick. It has some positives and very useful perks that are beneficial to the single player experience. So my suggestion for the class, which I will save for the end of the video, will try to not eliminate what makes this class so useful. Now it's time to start on the drawbacks of the Panther class. The class itself isn't bad, but it is more of a philosophy of the class that just doesn't translate well into PvP. I think in its conception is a big reason why classes and heroes in other games don't translate well into the PvP experience. The concept is 100%, but practically the act of disappearing and reappearing in a shootout is hard. I mean, even just running away is hard. Have you tried running away in Breakpoint in a gunfight? If the person even has a decent aim, they will just headshot you. So your only hope is if they shoot for the body, and it seems that the Panther is just not strong enough to take those bullets. So your only chances of disappearing in a firefight are slim unless you master the class itself. The class skills is a subject in itself. First, let's talk about once again the practicality of the skill. In theory, it should work as an AoE, a get out of jail free card that flashes and blinds the other players. I haven't seen many Panther players recently, but I have no idea how close you have to be for that flash to go off, but on the enemy player's screen I can tell you nothing happens. My screen has never turned white, and I don't think I've ever been disabled by the skill itself. In turn, I think the class skill is a little undercooked. While the class skill is undercooked, the class item is another issue, but in practicality, it works. It works as it does its job. It does cloak you from drones, which is useful. So if you ask yourself, why do I have it in the what's wrong category? Well, it just really isn't that great. The stealth that comes with the class already makes you disappear really quickly. Along with the class skill, you have two ways to disappear fairly quickly. Do we really need a third way to disappear really quickly? Not saying it isn't useful at all, but You can really do two things and avoid using the spray at all: stay inside or shoot the drone. The class item is only useful to you and not your team members like the other 3 class items. Gas for assault will push the enemies out into the open, health packs for the squad from the medic, and obviously the OP sensor grenade from the sharpshooter. These other items make the cloaking spray seem niche and only good for when there's a drone in the air. The entire philosophy behind Panther really just doesn't fit in PvP in its current state. Right now, Panther perks leads to this hide and seek gameplay, which is few and far between in most engagements in Ghost War. You are hardly given the chance to disappear once discovered unless it's by a drone. The main weapon benefits, the SMGs, which besides the PDR are pretty underpowered at the moment. Now if they update the meta to where SMGs are somewhat closer to assault rifles in terms of power, then maybe this isn't so bad. But just at the moment, it seems SMGs are a step above shotguns, but outside of the PDR, this isn't a good thing. So for PvP, I'd say it's pretty much forces you to play with one weapon to compete, the PDR. The class skill for PvP is also pretty much in a bad place. First, the animation takes way too long. You're not invincible during the animation, so the enemy can still shoot you. I've used this class skill plenty of times, and overall, it's just awkward to use in general. Not saying it doesn't have its place somewhere in Ghost War, but currently, its best use is to get away from being marked by the computer at the end of matches. These situations are just never really present enough to be beneficial like it is in the single player experience where you're always constantly surrounded by AI. Well, I'm not the kind of person to talk about problems and not offer solutions, so I have some ideas I think would work in Ghost War and PvE. First thing I would do is make all the animations faster. If there's one bare bones minimal change I would appreciate, would please make the spray animation quicker. There are a lot of button presses in between going to the item wheel, selecting the marking spray, then hitting the button while you wait for the animation to finish before you're fully incapable of being marked. I think that's a lot to go through in a short amount of time before you're being spotted by the drone. Obviously, making the animation of the class skill faster in all areas would be good. I would get rid of this slide and just make it a crouch animation with a wider AoE flash and smoke. I'm talking flashing out 30-50 meters. If this is a class skill, it should be just as ridiculous as the other ones, in my opinion. The next suggestion I have is more health. The class in general just feels pretty weak. Now, does it need to tank like the assault class? No, not at all, but currently it needs more health than it has now. The class deals with close engagements, so a tiny bit more health couldn't really hurt. Or the class should have some type of hidden health regen buff if you didn't want to mess with the overall health of the class itself. This last idea might be hard to implement, but what if, instead of unmarking spray for drones, what if you had smoke grenades? Now this might take a bit of work because there are no smoke grenades in the game, but if you look at the lore, it has the same animation of a smoke grenade, but just smaller. If you can somehow use this as a starting point and turn it into an actual smoke grenade that forces enemy players to have to use night vision, then I think it can make for some pretty interesting engagements. Well, that's all I have for you today, guys. This Panther video is something I've wanted to do for a while, so I'm glad I actually get to share it with the community. Please let me know what you think of the video itself. If there's some other suggestions, please let me know in the comments, and let's engage in some practical ways we can actually bring the Panther class back up to par. Please remember to like and subscribe if you enjoyed the video. If you didn't, you don't have to. That's the beauty of free choice, but it still helps me out regardless. Until the next one, guys, be more.